we
Do I hit the word start webinar or something, or do I hit that?
Takwa, you're on mute.
I'm getting ready to hit it now.
Oh, okay, that ain't me.
So
then.
we ready?
Ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon and welcome to the sixth annual Pathways to Hope Conference. My name is Reverend Mignon Jones-Spann, and I will be your workshop session moderator. I want to take a moment just to introduce you to the man of the hour. We're going to be in for quite a treat today. Our presenter is none other than Mr. Tracy Tyrone Johnson. He is the founder of TTJ Group in Illinois. He comes with us with 25 years experience. He has worked closely with nonprofits, small businesses, communities, and helping them with community organizing, environmental strategies, strategic planning. He has a wealth of knowledge in substance abuse and mental health services administration. He is the director of training and technical assistance for SheRay Association, LLC. He has formed quite a few partnerships. He's worked with the U.S. National Guard, the White House Office on National Drug Control Policy, Administration of Children and Families, and also with the Department of Education, just to name a few. But one of the things that he enjoys doing the most is jogging and spending time with his grandchildren. He is a native of Chicago, transplant here in the Texas area, and we indeed are in for a treat today. Before we move into the session, there are a few housekeeping rules that I'd like to share with everyone. If you could, we're going to put our questions in the Q&A box. Also, when you do that, if you could just put your name and your zip code so we kind of know the area that you're from. Now, if you are attending the conference to receive continuing education units, CEUs, please listen carefully. All registered attendees seeking CEUs must remain in the session for the entire duration. These sessions are approximately 75 minutes long, so 1.25 CEUs will be issued upon approval in the areas of LPC, LMFT, and social workers and psychologists. Each attendee can qualify for a total of 4 CEUs, eligible workshops, Friday through Saturday. A post-session survey is required, as well as a daily conference evaluation. For those joining us out of state, please follow your CEU instructions, but it will be your responsibility to seek the final approval from your state's credentialing board. We are grateful to have the support of NAMI Texas and the Bexar County Recast Project for making the CEUs available. Again, all registered attendees seeking CEUs must remain in the session for the duration. So now it is my pleasure to turn us over into the hands of our speaker today, Mr. Tracy Tyrone Johnson.
Well, thank you, Reverend. Thank you for that introduction. And I want to, first of all, welcome everyone to today's session. I'm excited to have you be a part of today's session. I appreciate you taking your time out and being a part of today's session. And just in case, I know y'all just probably had a little break and now you're trying to get back, and it's been a long day, and I know it's been an awesome Pathways conference. But I want to just I see some people are saying hello, so keep saying hello because I want to know who you are. Give me a city or a state or something. Let me know who you are because I want to make sure you're all in the right one. Bam! Break the stigma. Ask for help. Make the call. Make the change. This is the workshop that you're in. I am so excited to be here. Now, for those of you who probably want to just think you're going to just listen to me and do something else, I kind of like interaction. You know what I mean? So I'm going to have you all be engaging, ask questions, get some insight. I might even ask your mic to be unmuted. So I may have Takwa to unmute your mic for a minute. We got a short window of time, so I think it's important that we get started. But please make sure you put in that chat your name, say hello or something and where you're from. All right? All right, let's get started. Well, today what I want to do is I really want to make sure that we talk about, I want to introduce you to BAM, which we call BAM. It's a product of what we started at my company called TTJ Group, and my other company, SheRay and Associates. And how we're using the BAM and a stigma reduction plan around different parts of the country, working with communities of color primarily. Then I want to introduce you to the implications, exploring the implications of health stigma and how the stigma can really play health stigma and discrimination framework on underserved populations. And then I finally want to, hopefully by the end of the time, I want you to be able to consider strategies to really address stigma within your community. I want to leave you with some resources. I want to hear what y'all doing in y'all community, because it's really critical. In any good learning atmosphere, in my role when I worked for SAMHSA as the director for training and technical assistance for the central region, in my 10 and a half years doing that work, I really wanted to engage and hear from folks at the community level. Unfortunately, COVID has its way of making sure that we can't be close, because normally I would have you all in different parts of the room. We'd be doing activities and stuff, but still learning, because I believe learning is important, and you want to impact all those in critical learning styles. So starting out, one of the things that we've learned from Mother Teresa is that, even if we're going to work and do faith type of work in any kind of way, that faith in action is love, and love in action is service. And so we want to talk about the importance that if we're going to move forward, as Dr. King said, you have to take that first step. And that if you take that first step, that's really critical, because that first step allows you to really move forward and really have the impact in what we need to do. But you got to take that first step. All right. So, many communities, and I want to really touch on a lot of communities as it relates to how BAM really got started, was really looking at some impact in communities in Milwaukee. One of the things in Milwaukee when we were doing this last year, and doing right in the middle of the COVID, the Milwaukee County Behavioral Health Division came to us and said that between the months of March of 2020 and September of 2020, they've had almost 289 suicides. And it was roughly around the issue of, among people of color, particularly around, folks not feeling connected or wanting to know how to get the service. And so what we learned was that the faith community started stepping up. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, how the faith community has had that history of leading the way. And so when you think about any kind of mental health support, you got to figure out a way to look at those partners, all kinds of partners who play that role, but also sometimes the faith community is sometimes left out or ignored or expected, if you will, to do their role, but do it in a certain way. But I want to take a few slides and touch about the history of how the faith community has been leading the way as it relates to impacting stigma. We know that the faith community has been really instrumental and has really been instrumental in really impacting and bringing together a whole host of reversing those societal ills. We know that's critical. Faith-based was there in the world when certain things took place. So, let's think about when there was slavery in our country. What was the impact? I want you to write in the text. What was the impact that you believe during slavery that the faith community had during slavery? What was that impact? And Takwa and Reverend Mignon, feel free to read just a few, but I just want you to put in the chat what you believe the faith community had in terms of impacting slavery during that time period. Okay? Come on, y'all, get them fingers moving. I want to see y'all doing something. How we doing? How we doing, Takwa and Reverend Mignon? How we doing?
Things are coming in the chat.
And okay, great, awesome. So we know that the faith community has had either positive or negative impact, right? So it has a lot of impact. But I want to see what folks are saying. Keep bringing them in. Okay. Next one is I really want you to think about this. What has the impact of the faith community has had with the homelessness? What have they had with homelessness? What have they done? When we see homelessness in your community, wherever you're located, what impact have you witnessed the faith community, positive or negative, had as it relates to homelessness? Keep right in the chat. Tell me what you're thinking. Keep them coming, y'all. As it relates to just poverty in general, what was the impact of the faith community as it relates to poverty? What impacts have you seen that has taken place and that is going on in just poverty? You know, and what role has the faith community played?
So one of the things that we
okay,
see,
good.
One of the things we see in the chat, it says most resources are faith community funded.
Faith community funded, okay.
Earlier, one of the comments earlier was that the church was the place that provided hope and strength for particularly the African American communities.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So we've had homelessness, we've had slavery, we've had poverty, right, you all? Okay, keep them coming. Keep them coming, because I don't want y'all to stop, all right? Keep them coming, because I want to hear your thoughts. But I will say this, I could go on and on in different topics, but much of what community members learn about things like alcohol, tobacco, other drug use, or anything of the three areas that we just talked about is conveyed through what the faith community says or what the faith community does not say about it. So the faith community is a critical point and a critical piece in this circle. No matter how or what faith we believe in, if we believe in a certain faith, but we know religion and faith has played that role in really impacting all kinds of ills. Okay? So here's a question for you. And here I want to hear you tell me what you think. I want to know from you all, what have faith-based spiritual institutions done or are currently doing to be involved to impact the addiction epidemic? And then I want you to add the mental health epidemic that we've seen because of COVID. We've seen a rise in both. So what has the faith community and spiritual institutions done or are currently doing to really be involved to impact those two epidemics, the mental health and addiction epidemic? Get those mics going, get those chats going. I want to hear what you got to say.
So, Mr. Tracy, I'd like to speak to what the faith community is doing here in San Antonio.
Okay,
regards to mental health.
Yes, ma'am.
If you all have been on any of the other sessions, San Antonio has launched what is called Bridges to Care. And there are faith communities working in partnership with NAMI and sacred.org to allow churches to become behavioral health friendly churches. And we have wellness champions who did 20 hours of mental wellness training, suicide prevention, recognizing trauma. And in every district, there will be a cohort of churches with mental health wellness trainers who can connect people to the resources that they need in the city.
Wow.
And it's called Bridges to Care.
Awesome. Bridges to Care. And that sounds like a community-wide, a citywide event, right? Or is that a county-wide? Bexar County, is that? Or
right
is that San
now,
Antonio?
it's Bexar County.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. So you have a multitude of spiritual and faith-based institutions involved in that. What else? Anyone else? What are you putting? Where are we finding anything? Anyone else putting anything in the chat? I want to know, what have faith-based and spiritual institutions done or are currently doing to be involved in impacting both the mental health and the addiction epidemic that we see taking place today because of COVID, more than insurance, more than ever before. Anything else?
One of the things that we've seen in the chat is where it says churches can help direct people to rehab.
Oh, yes.
Someone else said, I recently attended a mental health conference at Presswood Baptist Church and also shared free mental health coaching training.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know that there are churches who have, the church where I'm on staff, and we have something called Sober for Life.
Okay, yeah.
A organization that meets on Mondays to talk about addictions and help people. It's almost like it's like an AA program.
Okay. And so in your programs, Reverend Mignon, or any of you on the audience, how is the church going about to get folks to come to it? How are they outreaching that to make that happen?
A lot of it is word of mouth.
Word of mouth, okay.
We advertise specifically when we give out our groceries, our food bank on Wednesdays. We put flyers in the bags that list the different ministries and things that the city and the church are offering.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Do we have any other ideas coming in on the chat?
Ariana put in that we provided to the homeless hot meals, clothes, a hub to cool down, hygiene resources. They got an opportunity to speak with them and to see how they were feeling. We helped the one who asked and that they were ready to go to rehab. So through their conversation, someone said they were ready to go to rehab and they were able to get them there.
Okay, awesome. Keep them coming, you all. There's more to come, but I just wanted to get a sense of what's going on out there. And one of the things when I think about, no matter how we do both mental health or any other kind of addiction, mental health is usually the baseline of what helps us make the important decisions or the tough decisions. We have to have some stability in our mental health before we can deal with any of the decisions at any level. But uniquely, the Institute of Medicine, probably about 2014, 2015, put out what we call a Continuum of Care process. And this is a continuum of care, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but I always want folks to know that this sort of is the process that says, no matter where you are on the continuum scale, the key baseline foundation of this continuum that was developed by the Institute of Medicine is what? You notice what it says at the bottom, mental health promotion. That no matter if you're doing prevention, no matter if you're doing early intervention, no matter if you're doing treatment, no matter if you're doing continuing care, you're always at the end of the base, you need mental health promotion. And one of the aspects of this is that this continuum says to us as community folks, is that at every area of life, no matter where we are, and as we help, we support, we prevent, working with individuals and human beings, that we need to have that basic piece of mental health promotion within that. Engaging folks and educating folks, making it aware of the importance of mental health, and that it has a critical piece in terms of impacting our communities and our neighborhoods. Institute of Medicine and the idea of working with and impacting this process says to us back in 2014, 2015 for prevention work, at the substance abuse prevention work said to us, if we're going to impact our communities, mental health has to be the real critical partner in substance abuse prevention. Now, if we was in a big audience, I would say, as my pastor would say, I'm gonna let that settle for a little bit. because the critical piece that we maybe be trying to prevent things from happening, but we also have to understand the level of mental health or mental illness that the communities that we're serving. That just because you do an intervention of prevention, you also have to impact the mental capacity of the folks you're working with. So doing an assessment of their targeted population is understandable, and knowing what mental level is important, where they're at as a targeted population, but also promoting mental health is good. It's a good thing. And the more we do that, the more of making decisions and feeling good about that is critical. So
Tracy, you got a question that came in the Q&A.
All
the question
right.
was, do you think that some churches are pressured to keep the solution solely on the Bible and not upset the congregation instead of sending people to seek therapy or to go to rehab?
And I'm going to answer it, but I want to have my awesome audience answer that question as well. So do I think that they have to focus on that and not talk about it and just focus on the Bible so it can be focused on that? I think some faith or religious organizations probably don't want to deal with that because they may not know about it. Mm-hmm. But as we look at some biblical individuals and how they had to deal with the decision-making process and how it impacted their mental capacity, even within certain faiths, Quran, Bible, Buddhism, we still have to understand that even though faith communities and faith leadership may not want to, we have to educate, first inform, and then educate the connection between faith and mental health and mental illness. Because at the end of the day, I truly believe that faith communities and faith leaders really want parishioners to really have a sense of who they are, where they are in their lot of life, and how they can help themselves as well as help others become closer to that faith. And so that's a great question. Who asked that question?
Miss Mary Bobbitt.
Miss Mary? Miss Mary, can we unmute you?
I don't think she can be unmuted. I don't think she can be unmuted, but she said, yes, she asked that question.
All right, Miss Mary. Okay, I was going to try to get you to come on and say something. All right, thank you, Rav. We appreciate that. Any other questions? Any other comments?
Miss Diane Banks made the comment in agreement with what you said, that I believe that the huge part of it is simply not knowing how to respond. And education is key, and even leaders don't know what they don't know.
That's right. And what I want to do in this PowerPoint, I'm sure will be available to you all later on, but I want you to take some of these resources and start using it within your communities, because these resources is part of your ultimate toolkit that you can do to really impact not only faith communities, but other key sectors in the community that can be supportive of really bringing mental health, mental illness to the forefront as it relates to any of the epidemics that we see. Substance abuse, violence prevention, those kinds of things are really connected. And so as my mentor, Beverly Watts Davis, would say, is that prevention is prevention is prevention. And so that means that no matter what topic it is, we're all tied to one garment of destiny. And so we have to be able to understand that I hope some of these resources that I have at the end of this presentation will be useful for you all, that you can go out and utilize them to really impact and have a real impact in your communities, okay? So let's get to some things that we know. What is BAM? Okay, what is BAM? What is BAM? What is BAM? You all ask good questions, because BAM, when we created it about over a year and a half ago, we labeled it as an environmental strategy. What is that? It's not a farming thing. It's really impacting the community in which you're serving. It's an environmental approach that really focuses on looking at the entire system about what and understanding what's really concerning our communities around stigma, and the barriers of people wanting to impact collective services that you all mentioned that are going in your community. Sometimes the barriers of stigma keep people, true folks who need the service, from impacting that service. And we think that we started this project called BAM, which stands for Break the Stigma, Ask for Help, Make the Call, and then Make the Change. I'll repeat that for you one more time. Break the stigma, ask for help, make the call, and then make the change. And this process really allows for a community data-driven, I'll repeat that, community data-driven solutions to be developed through not one organization, no, not two organizations, but a collaboration of local experts in the community to work together, similar to what Rev had just talked about, Reverend Jones Spann talked about in terms of what they're doing. It takes a collaboration, not beating each other up, but a collaboration of local folks working together to have a data-driven process to impact the community around reducing stigma, impacting access, increasing access to services, so people can feel like they want to break that stigma. They want to really ask for help. Then they don't mind. They know they can ask for help, but they can truly make the call or walk in and get the help, and then finally make that change. But it's a two-way street. It's just not the individual who needs to break the stigma. Can I get an amen? You can type that in if you want, y'all. But it's really also the provider, the folks who are giving the service. How stigmatizing are they? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But BAM was a way, it is a way to get communities to understand, providers to understand, and individuals to understand that they both need to break that stigma, ask for help, make the call, and then make the change. Because it's just not the individual who needs it as well. We call it BAM behavioral health. And BAM behavioral health, the outcomes that we really focus in on BAM behavioral health is that we really want to identify the stigmas and any barriers that hold individuals back from obtaining any kind of help. Identifying them first, and then equipping the folks with proper information and education so they can get that support, that service, and equipping the organization the proper information and the proper education about stigma so they can not be stigmatizing as well. And then we hope that they provide, when we did it, we provided local and national resources for the individuals and the communities to really get the help that's needed. Because we know that if individuals are equipped, if they're knowledgeable, if they understand it, and then they equip them, then we want to help them make that action or make that call. And then make that second action is make that change. But nothing takes place until we have to, as community-based agencies, faith-based agencies, organizations, and individuals, really believe in that stigma and reduce that stigma so folks can ask for help, so folks can make the call. Okay? How are we doing on chat? Everything good? So one of the things that when we implement the BAM process, and we're actually doing that in about 15 different counties in Louisiana, and 12 parishes in Louisiana, about 7 counties in Ohio, and 3 or 4 counties in different other states around the country. We have incorporated what I call the health, stigma, and discrimination framework. Dr. Stengel and her team in 2019 brought out this framework, and I say it's open for any of you all to look at. And it really focuses on how we can look at reducing the stigma and how it impacts discrimination. So if we're going to really have people break the stigma and ask for help, we have to know internally, how do we do that? And we said we wanted to identify an evidence-based process that has been tested and affected in communities around the country. And Dr. Stengel and her team put together this framework that really looks at what is important to really intervene and what policies are on or any other health-related stigmas that impact people from breaking that stigma and making that call. Okay? So before we get into that, I gotta take out and really define, let's define stigma. It's a mark of disgrace. It's associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or a person. According to CDC, stigma is a discrimination against an identifiable group of people, place, or nation. It is associated with a lack of knowledge, need for blame, fears, and rumors or myths. Now, I know it don't happen in your community. I know that I'm not thinking of your community, but I do have a question for you to put in the chat. If you can tell me, have any of you had been impacted by stigma, and if you want to express that, or have you seen others impacted by stigma? If you've seen others impacted by stigma, what did you witness? What did you see? Put that in the chat, and hopefully that my team of Reverend Mignon and Teague will look at that and provide some impact, because I want to hear what you know, what you've seen, and maybe some of you haven't seen stigma, which is understandable. But have any of you seen others who have witnessed stigma, or have you personally witnessed stigma in your communities or in the work that you do? If you're working for an organization, could that be a possibility that they may be stigmatizing an identifiable group or place or nation? And there's tools that you can use that can really impact to know how stigmatizing are we as an organization, how stigmatizing are we as a faith organization, to really get individuals and folks to understand stigma is that two-way process. And many times what we know, what's on top of the iceberg, is not what we see underneath. A lot of times, when we think about working with individuals, many times, or we're trying to reach individuals, we think because what we see on the outside is really the underlying factor. But as this one awesome example shows us, a piece of a nice glacier ice rock, that the glacier is really bigger than what we see out up top. That in fact, that just like individuals, it's all hidden underneath the water, and you don't see that part. And even when we talk about breaking the stigma, ask for help, and making the call, that there's an onion peeling process, that we have to peel back the onion and not just feel like because we are giving away something to a group that we've done our part. That we have to really begin to impact the individual by letting them feel comfortable and reduce the stigma so they can feel comfortable in asking for the help. And then that way they can do that action-oriented piece of making the call and then ultimately making the change. So I want to stop there and hear from folks. Thoughts, comments as a result to stigma. Anyone?
So one of the comments initially was about the breaking, where you asked, and the person said you have to understand the root of where the stigma comes from.
Yes.
And Ms. Banks put, stigma is rooted in both the African American community and the Hispanic community. They both are still very similar, especially as iterated in faith-based communities.
Yes.
even as it relates to the armed forces. I have seen it as a veteran.
She made a point is that even we think just in a community setting, but in an institution like armed services, she's saying that she's witnessed stigma happening and possibly even the impact of that stigma and what role it played in that and on those individuals. Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Any
Another
others?
chat says, I was training at a mental health facility, and my trainer told me, as she had no sympathy for drug addicts because they do it to themselves and she doesn't like working with them. I said, well, send them my way because I'm a recovering addict and we do recover. She was so embarrassed. Even someone working at a psychiatric hospital had a misunderstanding of people.
You see how impactful that was. And so if we're going to have people break that stigma, we have to have gatekeepers. Like, who just said that? Who just said that? I want to call her a gatekeeper.
Let me go back.
I'm sorry. That's a gatekeeper, because in this world of stigma, he or she is truly playing that role as a gatekeeper, y'all. And so we need gatekeepers to break the stigma.
That was Miss Mary.
Miss Mary
Bobbitt, who asked the original question.
All right, Miss Mary,
She's our
God bless you.
gatekeeper.
God bless you. We need gatekeepers. And what we found in the BAM process is that we've got to have people who help break the stigma. And many times it has to be people who we stand shoulder to shoulder with in our place of work or in our place of faith or in our place of home. Because a lot of times the stigma has to be broken by people that we have close relationships to. Can I get an amen? That's critical. That's critical in what we do and how we break the stigma, how we use BAM as a critical point, and as Dr. Stengel has said in her research, is that it has to be uncovered to be recovered in order to break the stigma. What else we got? We got other topics coming in?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. All right. So let me say this, is that we know that stigma exists when four specific components come together. Dr. Link and Dr. Fellon really identified this some time ago, and it's still true today. That differentiation and labeling is so important. That what happens is when we identify people that have differences in our work labeling, it's a really way of really putting people in a certain class or a certain way. And it really has an impact on just the amount of how we oversimplify. I'll put it this way: people who wear glasses. Okay, all folks wear glasses. They da. Okay, we socially judge folks, and that is the first piece of the table that stigma impacts. Then we link that differentiation and labeling to a stereotype. That we label the differences because they're different. So we say that all people who wear glasses can't drive because that's why they got glasses. So automatically we're labeling and we're stereotyping. First we're labeling, then we're stereotyping them. And then if you don't wear glasses, then you make it an us versus them. Those folks who wear glasses, they can't drive because they can't see. So you begin to do that us versus them mentality. And when you do that, it puts a certain barrier up. And then finally, the fourth piece that brings it all together, y'all, is that as we label, as we differentiate, as we provide stereotypes, as we provide that disadvantage, as if they're undesirable characteristics, that they have lost some status, that we have to discriminate them on top of that other labeling, that we keep them from getting things like housing, like mental illness help, like mental wealth support, like healthcare support, like key treatment support. So if you differentiate them and you label them, you stereotype them, you put that us versus them, and then you finally keep them from getting the services that you all have been talking about today, stigma is there because of those four things.
Mm-hmm.
When they come together, we have impact. And I know it's none of us, but I ask you at all points, and I ask myself at all points, how do I reduce those four components to keep stigma? And that's what BAM really focuses in on. You break the stigma by reducing that differentiation and labeling in any part of our life as much as we possibly can. We reduce that link to stereotyping people and individuals, like Sister Mary said about those folks who have drug problems.
Mm-hmm.
Label them and then stereotype them. And then what happens is there is as if that person is better than. It's not because that they, since they haven't used, they begin to have that us versus them mentality. And then on top of that, then they said, I don't want to deal with that person. So now that person is not getting the proper service that they should be getting because those four components that Sister Mary has just gave an awesome example of, that happens in every day, every way, in every community around this country. And if we're going to reduce those four components that Dr. Link and Phelan talk about, is that we've got to peel away each one of those four components.
One of the comments in our chat says individuals need to self-educate and advocate for others who are vulnerable.
Love it.
You have to be that gatekeeper, like you said.
Yes, you self-educate. Oh, so that means that we always got to keep learning and educating ourselves. Yes, it does. Because what can happen, one of those four components can easily slip back in, and it reduces our ability to get the help that we truly need. And stigma could be financial bear on our communities. Stigma could be a mental health bear on our families. Stigma could be a mental health on our economic process on what we could be doing. Stigma can play that key role from keeping that person who needs that real help to become an important factor in our community, because one of these four components all collectively has impacted that person. And we have to play that role. Are there any examples today in our country that anyone can think of that we see stigma impacting our society in our country? Feel free to chat and put that in the chat. But I'm gonna move on, but I want to make sure that you feel free to chat and put that in the chat. Any examples that we see in our society that plays that role? Because I want y'all to be telling me I want us to talk and learn from each other, y'all. All right. So how does stigma impact? How stigma impacts? In an awesome book that was called Changing the Conversation, it said that stigma was addressed as a powerful shame-based, y'all. Powerful shame-based mark of disgrace and reproach that impedes. I would, when you get this, circle that word, impedes treatment and recovery. And I want you to put, when I talk about treatment, I'm talking about mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, violence treatment. I'm talking about healthcare treatment. Come on, y'all. Come on, family. We're talking about all kinds of treatment and any type of recovery. If we're going to reduce stigma, we have to reduce that shame-based mark of disgrace. And when we do break the stigma, ask for help, make the call, and make the change, we begin by understanding where people are, where our community are as a collective body, and what we do as a community to reduce that stigma on us. We have to start that conversation. And that's really important. Okay?
So in the chat, one of the comments were felons. There are stigmas against felons.
Mm-hmm.
Stigmas against racial and ethnic disparities, people who are different. Even now, there's a stigma if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
There's a stigma sometimes there's stigmas if you're male or female.
Yes, it is.
If you're trans or LGBTQ.
Yes, it is.
There are all kinds of
sure
stigmas.
Is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But if we want to better the person, we want the person to become a productive human being, our role is as we work in our lot of life, whatever it is, business world, nonprofit world, faith-based world, community-based world, whatever lot of life we have, and we want that person to become a productive citizen, we have to be able to know what stigmas that we are providing or our communities are providing and work at it every day of reducing the stigma. At least asking the question, are we stigmatizing our communities? Any others? Boy, time flies when you're having fun, y'all. So what I like to do, and this is the world according to Tracy, I like to say that within those 4 components that I just listed, labeling, us versus them, differentiation, stereotyping, and then discrimination, I like to say that those things happen within certain domains, or for the basic word, in certain areas in our life. Okay, it has areas of real impact. It impacts the individual person, me, Tracy. If I am feeling stigmatized or I am stigmatizing someone else, it impacts me at the individual level. If somebody who is my friend is stigmatizing me or trying to get me to stigmatize with them someone else, so the peers of me, right? The family that I come from, if there is some stigmatizing going on, even within our loved ones, dad, brother, uncle, grandpa, grandma, if they're stigmatizing in that family, we have to reduce those areas of stigmatization as well. If stigma is happening in an educational setting, school, college, university, whatever educational setting, that we have to impact stigma in that domain or in that topic area. If stigma is happening at the community level, which I mean is social groups, if I mean institutional groups in organization or governmental organization, we have to find a way and reduce stigma in that domain as well. But yet I didn't leave the other one out. But someone says not in faith that we're stigmatizing. I could be wrong, but in the domains of risk and protective factor, which these come from, they were the risk and protective factors as developed by Dr. David Hawkins and Dr. Richard Catalano at the University of Washington. I use their domain to say, if we're going to reduce any kind of addiction, then we got to understand how we're going to reduce stigma as well. And we need to reduce it in these domains. So faith community is critical as well to reduce the stigma to impact people. I'll let that settle for a minute. Reduce the stigma to impact people. So understanding that faith plays a critical role, community plays a critical role, education, school plays a critical role, our internal family plays a critical role, our peers that we hang with, that we connect with, that we have tea with, that we golf with, that we do whatever with, our peers play that role in enhancing or reducing stigma. And then we as the individual play that critical role as well.
There's a comment here from Stephanie, and she makes the comment that the Texas Empowerment Initiative helped with stigma by funding a Bill of Rights that helped healthcare, that was able to help people in the healthcare from getting funding for people who had physical and mental disabilities. So that bill helped fight against that, help people get what they needed.
See, that's an example how government can reduce stigma, but it took individuals to push that out, because if we don't reduce it, it will be a barrier on us having productive citizens. That from who was that from? Mary, you said?
That was Stephanie. Can you go
Stephanie.
back? Can you let us know in the chat, did the bill fight against helping people, or was it a bill for helping people?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so the bill was against. So her comment is, this is how stigma works.
Yes.
It was a bill that fought against people with physical and mental disabilities, so they couldn't get the help that they needed.
Lord help me. See, we have to understand, if we're going to have a true productive group of citizens, not 50% of a productive citizen, not 20%, but as we go towards that goal of having as much majority, if not full majority populations of productive citizens, we have got to, in our government, in our school, we all have to play that role to reduce stigma. I think you have to ask the question and ask the legislators, where are they about reducing stigma? Do you know about stigma? If you don't know about it, let you provide that training to them and to their staff, because stigma impacts us, and no one is immune to it, either providing it or receiving it. Stigma has no barriers.
Amen.
Stigma has no barriers. Okay, thank you. So remember, I mentioned Dr. Stingel and her team back in 2019, and you'll have this PowerPoint. I know you will, but in 2019, after years of research, they said if you look at the bottom, not the top, look at the bottom of this, and notice the domains that she focused in on: dealing with policy, dealing within the community, dealing within the organization, dealing within peers on how they interpersonalize with people, and dealing with the individual. She and her team found out there are certain drivers, that is, things that cause fear of social connectedness. We don't want people having the same economic issues that we have, or there's authoritarianness, or there's lack of awareness, or there's social judgment, or there's a way to blame, or there's a way to stereotype. There's certain drivers, y'all. Then there's also people who facilitate those drivers. I know ain't nobody on this call that does that. No, it's not us. But when you got those drivers, and you got folks who drive that process, they call them facilitators. What happens is they begin to mark the stigma. They begin to make the stigma become a reality. They begin to make the stigma impact the condition in which people can get help, i.e. what Sister Mary said about the person. If Sister Mary was not there to make that person aware, that coworker aware, there was a health condition that would have impacted that stigma. Okay? And then what happens is when there's race, when there's gender, when there's sexual orientation, or where you work or how you work, are you top dog or CEO or whatever, when those things come into play as marking that stigma, that becomes a manifestation of the stigma. The facilitators drive the drivers into marking people from getting true impact. And what happens is you begin to see certain types of stigma, what they call stigma experiences, which then could come back down and drive and facilitate again more of it. So it can be a circle right there at manifestation. And then what happens is we start practicing stigma types of stuff. We start stereotyping, we start prejudices, we start stigmatizing behavior, we start doing discriminatory attitudes. We begin to see it drive, and it becomes almost cyclical where it goes back down to the drivers and the people who are the facilitators to do it. And the awesome thing about Dr. Sangel and her team is that she said that if we're going to really look at it, we've got to have the affected populations. They must have access to things that are going to help reduce it. They must have access. She gave several examples and several methodologies. So we got to affect that population. If it's women in the service, if it's, all people who wear glasses, we got to work on that affected population. And then we gotta also work, like I said earlier, y'all, on the organizations and the institutions that tend to be the stigma barriers, keeping the stigma fences, I call them, keep them up. If we work on those two areas simultaneously, you begin to see some real good impact on the outcomes. Or you don't work on them, then you begin to see a decrease in morbidity, an increase in morbidity, incidents of more criminal activity, incidents of more mental health activities. You know, we got to work on those pieces by reducing the facilitators and drivers, by affecting the population and affecting the organization. But like I said, I know you all, as organizations or individuals, are not the ones doing it. I pray. But we have to be able to see that we have to impact that. Yes.
So there's a comment from Miss Mary. It says fear of being misunderstood or not communicating effectively keeps some people from even having the conversation.
Oh, see that fear. And so it's us as facilitators, because as facilitators, and that could really change things. And I ask you all to be the facilitators for change.
Sometimes there's a fear.
Go ahead.
If you're in the in group and you speak up against the stigma, there's a fear that you get put out the group and you now get lumped with the person being stigmatized.
That could happen. That could happen. That's so true. Is that Sister Mary? Or was that you, Reverend?
That was me.
All right. All right. Thank you for that. Yes, and it could. So we're asking you to be the gatekeeper. And sometimes when you, and I don't mean to be biblical, sometimes you have to be Nehemiah. Sometimes you have to stand on that wall. And you have to be the only one sometimes. I understand it, but you got to be able to, if we do it collectively and to start getting people to understand the importance of stigma, I think we could be the drivers, the positive drivers and the positive facilitators for ultimate outcomes that impact stigma and reduction in our communities. So what we've done in about several communities around the country, and we're doing it currently in different counties and around the country. My team is doing it. We're putting together what we helping communities do, what we call a stigma reduction plan. And what we do is we use the strategic prevention framework, which was created by SAMHSA, your own tax dollars at work. You can go online, go to samhsa.gov. You can type in the words strategic prevention framework. And it focuses on 5 critical areas with 2 overarching steps. You have to focus on data. What does a data-driven process say? You have to bring people to the table who normally are not at the table. That's capacity building. Then you got to really set a plan in place before you do anything. And then you finally implement. But also while you're doing these, you're evaluating your process steps on how you're doing. But most of all, within each one of those 5 steps, you have to be culturally competent. And you want to sustain the things that really work. So as we're working in these communities around the country with individuals, we're implementing the strategic prevention framework, but we're also bringing up the 4 key domains that Dr. Stengel and her team talked about. The drivers and the facilitators, the marking, the manifestation, and the outcomes. We're helping individuals first learn those things and where they fit. And then we look at 5 areas that they can really impact those. As I mentioned before, the individual, the social group, and Dr. Stengel put it in those words, individual, the peers, the community, the institutional is both the school and the organizational, like faith, education, and then of course, government. We're taking these key areas and we're training community members to understand the framework, to understand the role that stigma plays as it impacts negative drivers and facilitators, and what are the plans that they can put in place in their community, customized for their targeted neighborhood, as to how they're going to help reduce stigma in their targeted neighborhood. Because I will say, just like Rome wasn't built in a day, stigma won't be reduced in a day. That it takes a plan to really impact, to truly impact stigma in your communities. So the key components of the stigma reduction plan are these. And one of the things that we really focus in is that we look at who are collaborations, who are the key folks, who are the key folks that are there, what are some key stakeholders, some awesome grassroots, I'm gonna underline that, y'all, grassroots community members who are involved, and including those with lived experience, Sister Mary, lived experience. So they're important to have those folks involved. The other component that we're working with in those communities is that this got to be data driven. We can't just be thinking or guessing. We got to identify and review and analyze any and existing and real-time data so we know where our community's mindset is at, where they're thinking, where their thoughts are as it relates to this. But ultimately, we got to plan. And I know we want to jump right in and implement, but we got to plan first. Put a plan in place, y'all. Or if we don't put a plan in place, we will fail. So we got to put a plan in place that really develops data-driven steps and goals that centered on those identified stigmas in that targeted area that was identified by community members, key stakeholders, and so on. And then finally, what we do is we look at a comprehensive strategy. We measure the processes, we measure how they're doing it, what are some of the strengths, what are some of the challenges, and what are some of those innovations. Right now, we're working in Toledo, which is going through a major gun violence, like many communities are, with the mayor's office. And we're starting to meet with grassroots and key stakeholders and taking them through these steps. But a key reduction plan takes in these key areas, y'all. Any other chats, Reverend Mignon? I don't want to miss anything that you think I should know about.
One of the comments, Stephanie made the comment about basically we just need to see each other's humanity. We need to see each other as human. And then Ms. Brenda made a comment, no one wants to feel different or be treated differently. Yeah. And that's what keeps a lot of our young people and youth from seeking services. Say that,
yeah. Say that. We need to accept people for basic humanity, and no one wants to be treated any differently. They just want to be accepted and loved. Faith, hope, and love, and what God says, the greatest of these is love. So we all want to be loved. So to reduce that, the benefits of what we've done with that stigma reduction plan, it allows for stigma to be first brought out and exposed, turns the light on stigma. And so that's what we got to do in our processes. We have to turn the light on stigma first. And then we have those community members that we've organized, those stakeholders, they're on the front end of true planning. And then what happens? They develop a comprehensive data-driven plan that they all have agreed to. And they go after and identify types of funding and resources to really help them really move forward in that method. I know I probably only got about 3 more minutes, don't I, Reverend Mignon? Or do I have more? 7 more minutes?
You have more.
Okay.
Thank you, Takwa, because I had lost track of time.
So one of the things we know is that if we need, I always want to leave the folks that I talk with. I don't want to own the. I don't want to say my audience. I want to leave my folks, my peeps, y'all. I want to leave y'all with some examples and some resources, because I think if we want you to move this forward, you've got to know what's out there that you can utilize in your community to really make change. Because I'm gonna tell you, I got 6 grandkids. I got 1 great-grandson. I don't know where they're gonna live, and I need all y'all, wherever you are at, Bexar County, San Antonio, Houston, DFW, Richardson. I don't know where they might go, other states. So I told you I go back to we're all tied to one garment of destiny. What affects me affects others. I'm trying to affect others so they can positively affect my grandchildren. So I kind of got a personal reason that I want to share stuff with folks about strategies and actions. Here's an example we're doing right now. Mansfield UMADOT stands for Urban Minority Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Outreach Project. And we started with them a program called Community Connections. They're in 6 counties within the state of Ohio. They're working in have 12 different community partners within each county. They meet monthly. And what they do is they take that stigma reduction plan I just went over with you, and they're really engaging in that process. And they're provided a consistent education, training, awareness, technical assistance to go out and recruit more folks, but also go into the hedges and the byways of their targeted population and really begin to get those folks involved to figure out what's out there and what's needed. And Mansfield is a town that is between, if we got Ohio folks on it, between Columbus and Cleveland. But they're working all in 6 counties across Cincinnati, Columbus, Lima, Dayton, Mansfield, and Cleveland. And those urban areas that we're working with. And what we've done so far just this year, that we've seen across the folks that have been part of this community connection program, 75 new relationships have been established. 35 more people have finally been, as we reduce the stigma, are finally starting to be referred to treatment services. Then 475 folks in those areas have reached in the targeted population with messaging and regarding competent evidence-based treatment. And then over 1,000 impressions and in dissemination of information to communities in those six counties. We're doing more, but we're doing it strategically. We're not just trying to hit the masses and say we've done it. We're trying to make sure we have a methodology that can be replicated in those counties over and over and over and over again to impact a broader group of people. So if you are from a faith community, or if you are working or want to work with the faith community, I say to you this is important as it relates to stigma, that leadership has to be engaged. That, within those faith organizations or within those or nonprofit organizations as well, leadership has to be engaged. They don't have to be the leader of this process, but they have to be engaged. They have to be educated. And that infrastructure is in place to support the needs of those who are using opioids, or those who are having mental health issues and impacting their families. That it has to be, if you're in these organizations, it has to be some kind of infrastructure that's helping people. And that there's a plan, a process in place to participate in the stigma reduction plan. That we know that both opioid prevention, addiction, mental health prevention and addiction, there has to be knowledge put at the community level. And that even for young folks and young adults, that you begin putting in evidence-based programs and policies. But where do I find them? I know NAMI knows some evidence-based programs and policies and practices. I know SAMHSA has a website for evidence-based programs and practices and policies. The blueprint at Colorado University has a list of evidence-based programs and practices. So staff personnel must become knowledgeable about it. And then resources need to be allocated to address prevention, intervention, and treatment of mental health, substance use, and so on. What I believe the faith communities do is to provide assistance to congregational members. They can help members really develop personal guidelines for mental health and substance use. They can help members understand the spiritual dimension of substance abuse problems. And then they can work with community-based organizations to design and implement a really good community-based prevention effort. And then finally, they can develop that stigma reduction plan or that framework for integrating prevention within their entire community. There's a whole host of other resources that I think that can help stigma reduction work. Obviously, many of you may be familiar with mental health first aid. There's the National Council on NAMI. There's NAMI. There's the BAM-BH process. There's an awesome program called Faith Partners that are doing stigma reduction. There's that SAMHSA website I want you to know about as well. And then there's this awesome documentation module that is used for faith communities through an organization in Ohio called preventionfirst.org. Those things you can order, get online, get the stuff, make sure you contact those organizations and utilize them at their will. They're there for you. The ultimate role for us, if we're going to reduce stigma in our communities, is that it has to have the impact of all of us together. both faith and community. It's a peer thing, not an I thing. It's a peer thing, not an I thing. That's where I stop there. I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Reverend Mignon.
Mr. Tracy, I'm gonna ask you to say that last line one more time.
It's a peer thing, not an individual thing. It's a peer thing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It looks like we have 5 more minutes. Several people have asked, where are you located? Is there contact information? So if you could put that in the chat.
Yes, ma'am.
We'd really appreciate it. And you've got a lot of amens.
All right. Yeah,
you got a couple of preach, Tracy.
All right now. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Although they could not be unmuted, there was a lot of affirmation and confirmation in the chat.
All right. I love y'all. Y'all know what I'm talking. I see what if I was in person, we would be doing some corner meetings. We'd be having y'all all kinds of stuff. But I love y'all. I appreciate y'all.
Yes. And several people said, this was great information. It was things that we had not been presented before. Personally, that explanation on stigma was the best that I had ever seen. Just understanding those 4 components. Miss Mary said you got me fired up.
Miss Mary, I want to hear. Miss Mary, you go do your thing. Don't stop. You are the gatekeeper. And get some other gatekeepers. Build capacity. Get some other gatekeepers. Thank you. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
So before we close out, there are a few housekeeping rules or things that they want us to reiterate. So again, let's don't forget to fill out the survey. There's a survey at the end, so please take the time and fill out that survey. And in the chat, if you can do a reaction and give a hand clap, let's let Mr. Tracy know how much we have enjoyed what he has taught us today. You've imparted a great deal of wisdom, and not just words. You gave us practical ability, what to do next, and resources. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and we pray that God continues to bless you in that endeavor. So, and I have to read this. So it says, you can find a recording of this workshop on the NAMI San Antonio YouTube channel. If you would like a copy of the slides, you can find them on the Pathways of Hope website after the conference. So several of you I know wanted these slides. I was writing as fast as I can, so I'm thankful to know that I can get these slides. Again, I'm going to ask that you please fill out the workshop, the survey, and in that comment box, some of those comments that you guys put in the chat, put that in the comment box, what it was that you liked about this presentation and what you walked away with. So I'm also required to make sure that you remember you have to stay in for the whole session to get your CEUs. And it says it is required that you complete this survey if you are seeking CEUs for the workshop. So if you want your CEUs, the last part you need to do is to make sure you fill out the survey. Is there anything else that I need to cover, or are we clear?
We're clear.
All right. Thank you all for allowing me to be the moderator. Ms. Tracy, it was my pleasure meeting you.
Same here.
I'm excited to see and hear what else you do in connection with NAMI and the work that you're doing on stamping out the stigma.
Yes.
So, bam.
God bless. Yeah, God bless.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.